television filled the apartment with a cold blue glow. George sat alone in his recliner, one boot half unlaced, one sock rolled down around his ankle. The kind of small neglect that happens when a man stops believing anyone will notice. The chair sighed beneath him whenever he shifted his weight. The sound had become part of the room over the years, as familiar as the hum of the refrigerator and the rattle in the old vent whenever the air kicked on. The apartment smelled faintly of stale coffee, dust, and warm plastic from electronics that had been running too long. On the side table beside him sat an empty mug, a pair of reading glasses, and a stack of folded papers he had meant to sort 3 nights ago. Outside the window, the city moved the way it always did. Headlights crawled through the dark like white insects. Somewhere far off, a siren wailed, then faded. Tires hissed across wet pavement. A dog barked twice and stopped. People were still out there, living, spending, arguing, drinking, cheating, laughing, pretending tomorrow meant something more than another bill. None of it reached this room.
You spend most of your life building things,
His voice was low and rough, nearly swallowed by the television.
but you rarely get to see them finished.
He stared at the screen without really seeing it. The news anchor's mouth moved with the practiced urgency of someone paid to make every headline sound like the edge of the world. News anchor speaking in background.
Breaking tonight, global markets remain on edge as energy prices continue to climb. Political tensions overseas, supply instability, and growing economic uncertainty have fueled another day of losses. Officials are urging calm, but analysts warn the pressure may continue into next week.
The screen shifted to footage of ships crossing dark water, men in suits stepping to podiums, protesters shouting into cameras, and rows of red numbers falling across a market board. George watched in silence. His hands rested on the arms of the recliner. Thick hands, scarred hands, hands that had spent decades pulling wire, tightening lugs, bending conduit, setting gear, carrying the weight of power through buildings full of lives he would never know. Those hands had built things that mattered: schools, warehouses, clinics, control rooms, apartments taller than anything he had ever owned, places that hummed with clean light because men like him spent their bodies to make them work. And now those same hands shook when he reached too fast for a coffee cup. News anchor in background.
In other news, officials in several major cities are preparing for another weekend of demonstrations. Transportation disruptions, scattered outages, and severe weather watches are also expected to impact travel across multiple regions.
George snorted.
That figures.
He leaned his head back and looked at the ceiling fan, spinning above him in slow, lazy circles. It needed balancing. He had noticed that months ago, had meant to fix it, never did. There were a lot of things like that now. A loose cabinet hinge in the kitchen, a bad switch in the hallway that only worked if you hit it twice, a leaking faucet that dripped just enough to be annoying and not enough to force action. The kind of chores a younger man would have knocked out in one Saturday morning. The kind of chores an older man learns to live around. George shifted again, and pain stirred under his ribs. He ignored it. That was the way of it. You ignored what you could until you couldn't. Sore back, tight chest, numb fingers, bad sleep, long days, longer years. By the time pain became a problem, it had already unpacked its bags.
Consumer confidence slipped again this week as households report ongoing strain from rising costs, unstable employment, and uncertainty about the months ahead, reported the reporter on the TV.
Same story every year.
He muttered it under his breath, though there was no one there to hear him. The words hung in the air a moment and died. Silence settled over the room between each new burst of television noise, and in those quiet spaces George could feel the apartment around him. The tired walls, the old carpet, the weight of empty time, a life reduced to maintenance and memory. On the television, another smiling face replaced the anchor. A weather map glowed behind her in angry bands of color.
Storm systems are expected to move east overnight, bringing heavy winds, flooding concerns, and the potential for isolated outages. Residents are advised to stay alert and limit travel if conditions worsen.
George almost laughed.
Of course.
He rubbed at the center of his chest with the heel of his palm. It felt tight there. Not pain exactly. Pressure. Like a heavy thumb pressing inward, slowly, patiently, as if waiting for him to admit it had been there all along. He breathed through it. He had done harder things than breathe through pain. He had climbed steel in August heat, worked shutdowns on no sleep, pulled cable until both shoulders burned like fire, spent 14 hours on concrete and still driven home because missing work meant missing money, and missing money meant things fell apart fast. Pain was ordinary. What frightened him wasn't pain. It was quiet. That quiet moment after work, after the noise, after the grit, after the jokes and cussing and clatter, when a man sits down and realizes he has built a life around motion because stillness leaves too much room to think. George did not like thinking at night. Night brought inventory. Things done. Things not done. People gone. People he should have called. Mistakes that had hardened into fact. A younger version of himself drifted through his mind without invitation. Harder shoulders, quicker hands, more anger, more appetite, more certainty that time was something other people ran out of. He almost pitied that man. Almost. On the television, a panel of commentators had begun talking over one another. The sound rose and fell in sharp bursts.
What we are seeing is not temporary. This is structural stress. Across multiple systems at once came the voice of Panelist 1.
That may be true, but panic is exactly what we should avoid, said Panelist 2.
Tell that to people already choosing between fuel, groceries, and rent. Panelist 3 yelled.
George stared at the screen. For a moment, the lights flickered. Once, the television glitched. The panelist froze mid-sentence, her mouth open, one hand raised. The lights steadied again. George narrowed his eyes.
Come on, don't start.
The apartment held still. Then the lights flickered again. Twice. Longer this time. The refrigerator hum stuttered. The ceiling fan slowed. The television crackled and flashed.
Breaking updates from...
The power died. Every light in the apartment vanished. The television snapped to black. The ceiling fan coasted to a stop. The refrigerator fell silent. In an instant, the room became unnaturally still. George blinked. He waited for the city glow to bleed through the window. It didn't. The darkness outside was too complete. No headlights, no streetlights, no neon sign from the store across the road, no moon, no reflected sky, only black. The kind of black that didn't feel empty, the kind that felt occupied. George sat very still. His breathing sounded too loud. He could hear the pulse in his ears now, thick and fast.
Hello?
The word left his mouth and went nowhere. No neighbor cursed from another room. No car horn answered from below. No barking dog. It was as if the world had been unplugged along with the apartment. George swallowed. He reached toward the side table, fingers searching in the dark for the flashlight he kept there. His hand brushed the mug, then the glasses, then paper. No flashlight. He frowned. He always kept one there. The pressure in his chest tightened. He sat back slowly, listening. Nothing. Then something changed in the room. Not sound, not movement. Presence. That was the only word for it. A presence, as clear as a body standing inches behind him. The hairs on the back of his neck rose. Then a voice spoke. Soft. Calm. Close enough to feel.
Hello, George.
Every muscle in his body locked. He turned his head so sharply, pain shot up his neck. There was nothing there, only darkness.
Who said that?
His voice came out stronger than he felt, more anger than fear. Men like George often reach for anger first. Fear made you smaller. Anger lets you stand for one more second. No answer came. Then in the center of the room, a faint blue light appeared. Small at first, no bigger than a marble. It hovered in the air 3 feet off the carpet, casting a soft glow across the coffee table, the chair, the edge of the old rug. George stared at it. The light pulsed once. Again. It brightened enough for him to see the outlines of his own hands.
What the hell are you?
You have been very busy, George.
The blue light drifted closer. Its movement was smooth, effortless, almost curious. George pressed back into the recliner.
I don't remember inviting anyone into my apartment.
You didn't.
Then get out.
You know I can't do that.
The light hung there between him and the television, as calm as a star trapped indoors. George looked around again, trying to understand what he was seeing. Hallucination? Stroke? Heart attack? Gas leak? A dying brain making poetry out of failure? That had to be it.
I'm dying.
Yes.
There was no cruelty in the answer. No pity either. Just fact. George gave a dry, humorless laugh.
Well, that clears things up.
The pressure in his chest sharpened suddenly, burning beneath his sternum. His breath hitched. One hand flew to the arm of the chair, gripping hard enough for his knuckles to pale in the blue light. He waited for the next breath. It came late. Thin. He swallowed against the taste of iron rising in the back of his throat.
So what are you supposed to be? An angel? A demon? Some last bad joke before the lights go out?
None of those.
Then what? Unknown voice. A witness. A remnant. A memory that refused to die.
The room seemed to deepen around those words. The walls stretched farther away, as if the apartment had become larger on the inside. Shadows gathered in the corners, dense and watchful. The blue light brightened, and within it, George thought he saw shapes moving. Cities, fire, columns falling, a sky split by something vast and terrible. He blinked hard, but the images stayed.
No.
His voice shook now.
No, I don't need this. I need a phone. I need a damn ambulance.
There will be no ambulance.
Then I need to wake up.
You are awake.
The answer landed inside him like cold metal. The pain in his chest spread down his left arm. He knew what that meant. Knew it with the grim, practical clarity of a man who had spent enough time around hospitals and job site accidents to recognize the body quitting in real time. His mouth tightened.
Figures I'd go out in a chair.
It is only a chair because you believe it is.
That doesn't even mean anything.
It will.
The blue light drifted lower until it hovered at the height of his knees. It pulsed with a rhythm that did not match his heartbeat, and somehow that made it worse. It was alive in a way the room was not. On instinct, George looked toward the television again. The screen was black. Yet for a fraction of a second, he thought he saw something reflected there. Not himself. Something tall, broad, ancient. A shape standing behind the floating light. Too large for the room. Too still to be human. He jerked his head around. Nothing. Only darkness.
Who's in here with you?
You are not alone.
I can tell that.
He cannot come closer. Not yet.
Who?
The one who began this.
George stared at the blue light. His chest rose and fell in short, careful breaths. Sweat cooled on the back of his neck. Somewhere deep under the fear, anger still flickered.
If this is some kind of dying vision, you've got a strange sense of drama.
You always preferred blunt truth. Very well.
The light brightened again, and when it did, the room dissolved. Not all at once. Slowly, the walls thinned into darkness. The ceiling fan vanished. The side table bled into shadow. Even the television became a dim floating rectangle before it too was gone. George sat in his recliner inside an endless black plane with only the blue light before him. Far above, if above still meant anything, there were faint streaks of silver like cracks in stone. The sight struck something primal inside him. This was not his apartment anymore. This was something larger than place.
What did you do?
Removed the part that distracted you.
Put it back.
You do not have much time.
And then talk faster.
For the first time, the voice seemed almost amused.
You are dying, George. Your body has reached its end. Your heart is failing. Your life, as you understand it, is closing G.
I got that part.
But endings and beginnings have a habit of touching.
George let out a bitter breath.
You sound like a bad preacher.
And you sound like a man trying not to be afraid.
Maybe I am.
The admission surprised him. The darkness did not mock him for it. Neither did the light.
Fear is honest. It strips away vanity.
Then let's be honest. I don't want to die.
No one ever truly does. Not when the moment arrives.
I thought maybe I'd be ready. One day. Old. In bed. Something quiet. Maybe after I'd fixed the things I should have fixed.
His voice went softer.
Maybe after I'd become somebody worth remembering.
You mistake remembrance for worth.
Easy for a floating light to say.
You built more than you know.
The words landed oddly, not like comfort, like correction. George shook his head.
No family, no kids, no one waiting for me, no one checking if I made it home. Don't dress it up.
You wired hospitals where children survived the night. You built rooms where strangers learned whether they would live. You fed light into schools, shelters, towers, streets. You held systems together your whole life without needing applause.
That's just work.
Much of what matters is
George looked down at his hands. Even here, in this strange, dark place, they still looked like his hands. Scarred, heavy, stubborn, hands that knew their purpose better than the rest of him ever had. For a moment, he hated that he believed the light, not because it soothed him, because it made him feel seen. And being seen at the end, after a lifetime of being useful instead of known, was almost worse than being ignored.
Why me?
Because you can carry memory without breaking.
You've clearly never met me on a Monday.
Even your humor is defensive.
Keeps things from getting sentimental.
The blue light pulsed, brighter now. Within it, images gathered again. A valley wrapped in mist. A forest too vast to be natural. Stone marked with symbols he did not know but somehow almost understood. Children running with spears. A boy standing alone beside a weathered old man in robes. George stared.
What is that?
A beginning.
Mine?
If you accept it,
Except what?
a second life, a different world, a burden larger than the one you carried here.
And if I don't?
Then you die. Your body fails. Your mind fades. The dark closes, nothing more.
George looked into the black around him. There was no wind, no floor, no horizon, only that impossible stillness and the blue light waiting for his answer.
You make that sound simple.
It is simple. Not easy, never easy.
What's the catch?
Pain, loss, responsibility, the kind of change that tears before it heals.
You're not selling it well.
You never trusted easy offers.
George laughed then, and this time the sound surprised both of them. It came out weak, cracked, but real.
That's true.
The pain surged again. This time it dropped him forward in the chair. His breath broke. A hot blade drove through the center of his chest and down his arm. His vision narrowed. The blue light doubled, then tripled. He clenched his teeth against a groan and failed.
Damn it.
He could feel his heart misfiring now, not just struggling, but stumbling. The body knew before the mind accepted it. Something inside him had started to come apart.
The choice is closing.
Then answer one thing.
Ask.
Why would anything out there want a man like me?
The blue light came closer until it hovered inches from his face. Its glow washed across his eyes.
Because men like you build what others only claim to value. Because you know what it means to carry weight without witness. Because you kept going when your life became smaller instead of kinder. Because the world you are leaving behind did not break you. And because where you are going, someone must remember what was lost.
The words struck something deep inside him. Not pride, not hope. Something older. A stubbornness that had carried him through long jobs, hard winters, dead-end years, and private disappointments no one had ever heard him name. He had kept going, even when no one watched, even when no one cared, even when the reward for endurance was more endurance.
And if I say yes,
Then the next breath you fail to take here will become your first breath there.
and if I say no,
Then your last thought will belong to this room.
George tried to imagine that. The recliner, the dark, the unpaid bills, the dead television, the empty apartment holding the last shape of him until someone else found the body. He felt suddenly and fiercely that he wanted more than that. Not glory, not youth, not some clean heroic fantasy, just more. Another chance to build something that could not be reduced to invoices and worn joints in a quiet room.
I don't want this place to be the last thing I get.
Then let it go.
The darkness shifted. The enormous shape George had seen reflected in the television returned at the edge of sight. This time it was clearer. Still impossible, a figure vast as a monument, crowned not with gold, but with ruin, as if time itself had broken across his shoulders and stayed there. He stood beyond the blue light, mostly hidden, more absence than body, watching with ancient patience. George felt terror move through him like ice.
Who is that?
A king who lost everything. A father history lied about. A defeated power that learned defeat is sometimes another kind of design.
That's not an answer.
It is the only one you will survive right now.
The giant shape did not move, yet George felt the weight of its attention. Not hatred, not mercy, recognition. As if something impossibly old had looked across time and found him acceptable. That frightened him more than anything else so far.
I really must be dying.
Yes,
And you still haven't told me what you are?
not yet.
Convenient.
Necessary.
The pain sharpened one last time. George sucked in air and got almost none of it. The darkness pressed inward. His fingers lost strength. The recliner beneath him felt farther away, then strangely unimportant. He tried to lift one hand and managed only a twitch.
If this works, I won't remember this, will I?
Not all of it. Not the way you think, but I will.
You'll remember me?
All of you.
George closed his eyes for 1 second. Behind his lids, he saw sparks, blueprint lines, breaker panels, concrete floors under work boots, rain on a windshield after a 14-hour shift, a city skyline he had helped feed without ever really belonging to it. Then unexpectedly, he saw the valley from the light again. The boy, the old man waiting beside him, the forest. He opened his eyes.
All right.
Say it clearly.
I said all right.
Say it.
Fine.
He fought for breath.
Yes.
The blue light expanded instantly, not brighter, bigger. It unfolded like a star opening, flooding the dark with impossible color. Blue turned white, white turned silver. Symbols burned through the air in rings around him, old shapes that felt older than language and sharper than law. The massive figure beyond the light bowed his head. For the first time, George understood that whatever stood there was not bowing to him. It was honoring the choice. The darkness cracked. He heard it then, not with his ears. A great splitting sound like stone breaking under the ocean. The apartment returned around him in flashes. The recliner, the side table, the dead television, the window, the papers on the floor. Everything looked smaller now, fragile, temporary. He was back in the room and also no longer part of it. George's chest convulsed. His heart stuttered. Once, twice. The next beat did not come. The world narrowed to a point.
So, this is it.
This is the door.
His body slumped deeper into the recliner. His fingers slipped from the armrest. His mouth opened for one last breath. Nothing came. The room blurred at the edges. The television, dead and black, reflected only a pale, slumped shape and the glow hanging before it. George felt fear then, pure, animal, final, and under it something stranger, relief, because the waiting was over, because the choice had been made, because for the first time in years there was nothing left to maintain, nothing left to hold together, nothing left to outlast. He let go. The apartment vanished, the chair vanished, the city vanished. The dark swallowed him whole. Then came cold, not winter cold, birth cold, a violent rush of air against wet skin, weight, sound, the smell of smoke and old wood. George tried to move and found his limbs wrong. Smaller, lighter. His chest seized, then dragged in a ragged breath. It hurt. It hurt like knives. He coughed. Somewhere close by, a man's voice spoke in a low murmur, thick with exhaustion and wonder.
Easy now.
George's eyes opened. The world above him was dim and amber, lit by firelight dancing against rough timber beams. Shadows climbed the walls of a room built from old wood and stone. Herbs hung drying from the rafters. Rain tapped softly against shutters somewhere nearby. An old man leaned over him. His beard was white and untrimmed. His face was lined like weathered bark. His eyes, deep-set and unnervingly clear, watched him with the stillness of someone who had waited a very long time. George tried to speak. What came out was a weak, startled sound. Not a man's voice, a child's. He froze. His heart, young, fast, alive, hammered inside his chest. He lifted a hand in front of his face. Small fingers, smooth skin, no scars, no calluses, and no age. Breath caught in him again.
Yes, that part takes a moment.
The old man's tone was gentle, but there was steel under it. George tried to sit up and failed. The blankets tangled around him. His body felt alien, too light and too quick, every nerve awake in a way he had forgotten a body could be. What? The word cracked, thin, young. He stared at the old man in horror.
What happened to me?
You died.
The answer came without softness. George swallowed.
No,
Yes,
no, I was in my apartment and there was a light. There was.
He stopped. The blue glow was there, floating near the foot of the narrow bed. Small again, calm, watching. George stared at it with a terror so sharp it stole speech. George, you!
Yes,
But the voice was different now. Still calm, still clear, yet somehow closer. Less like something in the room, more like something inside the edges of thought itself. The old wizard followed George's gaze toward the blue light and inclined his head slightly, not in fear, but in acknowledgement.
you see her. Good.
Her?
that will do for now.
What are you?
Later,
Number! Now.
Later.
George looked from the old man to the light and back again. The room seemed to tilt. He was alive, impossible, young, somewhere else. And whatever had spoken to him in the dark had followed him through death. The rain tapped softly against the shutters. The fire popped. The old man drew a slow breath.
Listen carefully, boy.
Boy. The word struck him like another blow.
The life you knew is over. Grieve it later. Survive this first.
I'm not a boy.
You are now.
George looked down at himself again. Thin wrists beneath rough linen, small chest rising and falling too quickly, bare feet under the blanket. No age, no history on the body at all. The panic rising in him was wild and raw.
I don't understand.
you will.
Stop saying that.
Then I will say something else.
The old man leaned closer. Firelight sharpened the lines in his face, making him look older than age and harder than grief.
The gods broke the world once. They may yet finish the job. You have come into the narrow place between what was and what may still be saved. There are children like you. There are doors that should not open. There are powers that should not have survived. And there are things in the forest that will smell your fear before dawn.
George stared at him.
So, listen well. Your fear is allowed. Your confusion is expected. Your survival is not guaranteed.
Who are you?
The man who kept you alive long enough to ask that question.
The blue light drifted upward, turning slowly in the air.
And I am the one who will remember you.
Outside, somewhere beyond the walls of the hut, something howled in the dark. Not a dog, not a wolf. Something older. Something hungry. George felt the child's body tense around a man's dying memory. The old wizard looked toward the shuttered window, then back at him.
Welcome to your second beginning.
The fire cracked. The blue light pulsed once, and deep beyond the hut, in a forest too vast for reason, the darkness listened.